So what happens when the league's most creative offensive mind finally stops smiling and starts telling the truth? Because that's exactly what happened Tuesday. And if you blinked, you missed the moment Mike McDaniel quietly detonated a bomb that could reshape the Miami Dolphins for years. Mike McDaniel didn't yell. He didn't rant. He didn't throw anyone directly under the bus. But in the NFL, you don't need to shout to send a message. Sometimes all it takes is one sentence, delivered calmly, at the wrong podium in the wrong city. Because standing there as the newly introduced offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Chargers, Mike McDaniel wasn't just starting a new chapter. He was closing the book on Tua Tagovailoa. Or at least, that's how it sounded to everyone who's been paying attention. 4 seasons. One explosive offense. One franchise quarterback question that never fully went away. And now, one of the most telling press conferences of the entire offseason, McDaniel called football humbling. That word matters. Coaches don't use it casually. Humbling means something exposed you. It means something stripped away the illusion of control. And when McDaniel talked about what humbled him, he didn't mention defenses figuring him out. He didn't mention roster turnover. He didn't mention bad luck. He mentioned Tua. Not by name in every sentence, but by implication in every breath. He talked about injuries. He talked about availability. He talked about how the quarterback position suddenly pulled into focus, just how fragile success really is. That's not coach speak. That's a confession, because when Tua Tagovailoa was healthy, McDaniel looked like a genius. Motion everywhere. Tyreek Hill flying. Defenses guessing. Miami putting up points in bunches. The league scrambling to copy it. But when Tua wasn't there, or when he wasn't himself, the entire operation stalled. And that's the part McDaniel is no longer hiding from. In 2024, the injuries piled up. Tua missed significant time. The offense lost its rhythm. The Dolphins lost their edge. And for the first time, people started asking a dangerous question. Was the system elevating the quarterback, or was the quarterback limiting the system? By 2025, the answer still wasn't clear. Tua returned, but he didn't look the same. The timing felt off. The confidence wavered. The big moments slipped away. And eventually, with the playoffs out of reach, McDaniel made a decision that quietly said everything. He benched Tua Tagovailoa for the final 3 games of the season. Let that sink in. A former top 5 pick. A quarterback once billed as the face of the franchise. Sitting. Watching. While the season faded out. Coaches don't do that unless something is already broken beyond repair. And now McDaniel is gone. Fired. Not reassigned. Not given another year. Fired. For seasons, multiple playoff pushes, one of the most entertaining offenses in football, and it still wasn't enough. Which brings us to Los Angeles. Jim Harbaugh didn't hire Mike McDaniel to relive Miami. He hired him to fix something. To maximize Justin Herbert. To bring structure, creativity, and adaptability to an offense that has underachieved relative to its talent. And that's where McDaniel's words take on a second meaning. When he says the quarterback's health and effectiveness sharpened his focus, what he's really saying is that everything starts there. No scheme survives instability under center. No play design can outrun inconsistency. That's not a shot at Tua as a person. It's an indictment of the reality Miami lived in for 4 years. Availability is the best ability. And for all of Tua's accuracy, intelligence, and leadership, availability has been the shadow hanging over his career. Now here's the uncomfortable part for Dolphins fans. McDaniel didn't say this after being fired. He said it after being hired. He had nothing to gain by protecting Miami anymore. And he didn't. That changes the entire conversation around Tua's future. Because Miami now has to decide whether they're willing to tie the next era of the franchise to a quarterback whose own head coach just implied limited his effectiveness. That's not noise. That's not media spin. That's a former insider telling you exactly what went wrong. And remember, McDaniel didn't lose the locker room because players hated him. He lost it because results stopped matching expectations. When the offense sputtered, everything unraveled. Quarterback injuries forced McDaniel to juggle responsibilities. Head coach, play caller, crisis manager. That's not sustainable. And he admitted it. Now imagine what that admission sounds like inside the Dolphins front office. Imagine what it sounds like to ownership. Because if your offensive mastermind believes the quarterback narrowed his ceiling, what does that say about long-term belief? This is where the story gets bigger than one press conference. Miami has invested heavily around Tua. Weapons, protection, speed. Coaching. And yet the same question remains unanswered. Can he stay healthy enough, consistent enough, and explosive enough when it matters most? The benching at the end of 2025 wasn't about those games. It was about the future. It was about seeing something else. Anything else. And now McDaniel's words confirm what many suspected. That the Dolphins were constantly building around uncertainty. Contrast that with Los Angeles. Justin Herbert isn't perfect, but his physical profile and durability change how you coach. They change how aggressive you can be. They change how much you can expand the playbook. That's what McDaniel is excited about, even if he didn't say it directly. Because the lesson he learned in Miami wasn't about humility. It was about dependence. And dependence is dangerous when the foundation isn't stable. So where does that leave Tua Tagovailoa? It leaves him in limbo. A talented quarterback with moments of brilliance, but now with a former head coach subtly distancing himself from the results they shared. That doesn't mean Tua can't succeed. But it does mean the Dolphins can't ignore what's been said. The NFL is ruthless. Narratives become reality quickly. And when a respected offensive mind implies the quarterback was the limiting factor, front offices listen. This offseason just got a lot more complicated in Miami. Contract decisions, trade rumors, draft evaluations. Everything is back on the table, and here's the irony. Mike McDaniel didn't attack Tua. He humanized the situation. He admitted football exposed him. But in doing so, he exposed the truth Miami has been dancing around. You can't build a dynasty on what-ifs. Jim Harbaugh knows that. That's why he brought McDaniel in. To control what can be controlled. To eliminate excuses. To maximize certainty. And somewhere in South Florida, that reality is settling in. Because when the guy who built your offense walks away and says the quarterback clarified his limitations, you can't unhear it. This isn't about blame. It's about clarity. And Mike McDaniel just gave the league a whole lot of So now the question isn't whether McDaniel threw Tua under the bus. The question is whether Miami has been driving the same road for too long. And whether it's finally time to change direction before the window closes completely. That's the real story hiding in that press conference. And it might define the Dolphins' next decade. So let me ask you this, and be honest in the comments. Did Mike McDaniel quietly tell us the truth about Tua Tagovailoa, or did he dodge responsibility for his own failures in Miami? And here's where the ripple effect really starts to spread, because once a coach says something like that out loud, the league doesn't just hear it, it files it away. Defensive coordinators hear it. General managers hear it. Owners hear it. Quarterbacks especially hear it. This is how narratives harden in the NFL. Not through hot takes, but through quiet confirmations from people who were inside the building. Mike McDaniel didn't have to say, Tua can't stay healthy, or Tua limits what I can call. He let the league connect the dots. And trust me, they already were. Think about how differently Miami called games when Tua was at full strength versus when he wasn't. The motion became safer. The shots downfield disappeared. The offense stopped stressing defenses horizontally and vertically at the same time. That wasn't fear. That was adjustment. And adjustments like that tell you exactly what a coach believes about his quarterback's margin for error. When McDaniel talked about how the quarterback position narrowed his focus, what he was really describing was survival mode. Coaching not to dominate, but to endure. That's not where elite teams live. That's where teams stall out in January or never even get there. And that's why the benching at the end of 2025 matters more than any quote. Because when a coach benches his quarterback after playoff elimination, he's doing more than protecting health or evaluating depth. He's mentally detaching. He's starting the process of imagining something different. That moment is when relationships change. Trust shifts. Futures get quietly rewritten. Now put yourself in Tua Tagovailoa's position. You've battled injuries. You've fought through criticism. You've led a locker room. And now the coach who once went to war defending you is gone. And his first major comments elsewhere indirectly point back at you that that's not easy. And it puts immense pressure on what comes next. Because the Dolphins now face the most dangerous place an NFL franchise can live. The middle. Not bad enough to fully reset. Not good enough to contend confidently. And stuck debating whether loyalty is strength or stubbornness. Front offices hate that place. Coaches get fired there. Quarterbacks get replaced there. Windows close there. Mike McDaniel's departure didn't just remove a coach. It removed the strongest internal advocate for Tua Tagovailoa. And that changes everything. Who speaks for Tua now? Who is willing to say, unequivocally, that this team can win a Super Bowl with him, not just games in September. Because if that answer isn't clear, the NFL always moves on faster than fans expect. Look around the league. Quarterbacks don't get infinite chances anymore. Especially not ones with durability concerns. Especially not when the roster around them is expensive and aging. Miami doesn't have time for maybes. Tyreek Hill isn't getting younger. Contracts are tightening. Expectations are rising. And somewhere in all of that, Mike McDaniel just gave the Dolphins an uncomfortable gift. Honesty. Now let's flip the lens back to Los Angeles for a moment, because this isn't just about what McDaniel said about the past. It's about what he's planning for the future. Jim Harbaugh is not a coach who tolerates excuses. He builds identities. Physical. Relentless. Disciplined. He wants an offense that can travel in January, not just light up scoreboards in October. Mike McDaniel understands that now better than ever. He's lived through what happens when brilliance depends on fragility, that's why this pairing is so fascinating. Harbaugh brings structure. McDaniel brings creativity. And Justin Herbert gives them a foundation that doesn't require constant recalibration. Availability changes confidence. Confidence changes play calling. Play calling changes outcomes. This is why McDaniel's tone felt different at that podium. Less playful. More grounded. Less optimism. More realism. He's a coach who learned the hard way that scheme is only as powerful as the player executing it every single week. And that lesson didn't come from theory. It came from watching seasons slip away, because the most important position in sports couldn't stay upright. That's not bitterness. That's experience. Which brings us back to Miami one last time. Because the Dolphins now have to decide whether they interpret McDaniel's comments as a warning or a betrayal. Do they double down and prove him wrong? Or do they quietly accept that the ceiling they've been chasing might never fully materialize with the current setup? That decision will define the franchise. And here's the twist. Tua Tagovailoa still controls part of this story. Because the best way to silence doubt in the NFL isn't words. It's availability. Consistency. January performances. If Tua comes back healthy, decisive, and dominant, all of this becomes background noise. But if the same patterns repeat, McDaniel's words will echo louder every week. That's the weight quarterbacks carry. Fair or not. So this isn't about piling on Tua. It's about acknowledging that the margin is gone. There's no more patience tax in Miami. Mike McDaniel didn't just change teams. He changed the conversation. And sometimes the most powerful statements in football aren't made with blame. They're made with perspective. The league heard him. Miami felt it. And now, the countdown to clarity has officially begun.